marvelous guy to go out and have a few drinks with and talk and argue and debate, and he was an incredibly funny man.
Ongoing debates about what? What's
Oh, I can remember.
how we're changing If there was a whole.
Ready? Okay. Roll 17, take 5.
5.
Check the focus. Say yes, and. Alright.
Telling me some story or humanizing element. Oh, okay.
Steak. So we just need a second sticks in there.
Not a lot, but I got some key stuff.
Why don't we talk? We were talking about having some great debates. Tell us something about Paul Clayton that might humanize a little bit for folks who.
Well, this is in 1959, roughly, and Castro and company were in the Sierra Maestra, and the whole thing was about to come into its denouement. And Paul, we used to call him Pablo, partly because of this, wanted to get up a bunch of volunteers and call it the Patrick Henry Brigade and bring it down to the Sierra Maestra. And I remember one night sitting around with him and a bunch of other people at the village gate and saying, well, I can go along with you up to a certain point, but what we have to do is we have to take the Patrick Henry Brigade up to the Sierra Catskills and liberate Grossinger's and turn it into a folk music room. This is the kind of serious, really heavy political discourse that went on amongst us. I mean, we were real theoretical heavyweights, obviously.
You mentioned Washington Square. What scene did you find there as you started spending your time in the village as a young man Sunday afternoons singing?
Well, I didn't really think all that much of what was going on when I first noticed it. For one thing, I was very much into jazz and that sort of thing, and a lot of what was going on in Washington Square at that point was summer camp music, essentially, and it was very dopey. And there was a lot of people doing the horror, and a lot of group singing and hey lolly lolly low and that sort of thing. And I mean, it was really, it really was childish. And I was also at this time taking myself as seriously as only a 17 or 18-year-old. Nothing bothers an 18-year-old more than childishness, obviously. So I really didn't pay much attention to what was going on there for years. I used to just sort of walk through the square on my way east or on my way west and look neither to the left nor to the right. What turned me around was the fact that there were some things going on there which weren't nearly as conspicuous, that were to me very interesting. There were that's where, as I say, I met Gary Davis. I remember one time running into Tom Paley, whom I didn't know at the time, and he was finger picking, and I had never really seen finger picking before. I had heard it on record, and I had assumed that it was two guitarists with flat picks who were doing that. And I saw Tom doing something, and when he was finished the song, I immediately buttonholed him and said, "Okay, how do you do that?" And he gave me an impromptu lesson. It basically is what got me started in finger picking. Or getting the hang of how to do it was Paley just showing me a few things about it and giving me a push in the right direction. There were some very good singers and guitarists who were around there, but they didn't make as much noise as the group singers did, obviously. And so a guy like Dick Rosmini, who was not only one of the best guitarists around in those days, his guitar playing in those days would stack up favorably with anybody's guitar playing right now. He was a monster on that instrument. And gradually I got to know, and I mentioned Barry Kornfeld, who's an excellent musician. I got to know a bunch of these people, and I started to learn from them. And I could see the tie-in between what they were doing in jazz, or the jazz that I was interested in. And the connection was made, never again to be broken.
You said the tie-in. Now they were doing, I take it, traditional folk tunes. Is that
Pretty much.
what was the tie-in you referred to?
Well, between the folk blues and jazz, there was the connection is very intimate. That jazz wasn't invented out of the whole cloth, and furthermore, early jazz didn't perform to a vacuum, so that there was a constant interplay between jazz and some forms of folk music for the first 20 or 30 years of its history, which is the period in jazz that I was the most interested in at that time. So that when Bessie Smith sings Backwater Blues, is it jazz or is it a folk song? I wouldn't want to be put on the line to answer that question. I don't know. There is no clear distinction between the two in a case like that, and there are many, many, many other cases just like it.
Did you start taking to playing down in the square yourself?
Oh yes, of course. I was an incurable ham, and one of the things that had sort of kept me around the jazz thing was I was loud enough so that I could do vocals with a band without a mic. And so that was one of my strong points in Washington Square, that I was possibly the best hog caller in Greenwich Village at that point. It wasn't good, but I certainly made myself heard.
Did you play by yourself? Did you hook up with these folks?
Well, mostly I was working. Mostly I was doing stuff by myself. We tended to take turns rather than sing together. That was, it wasn't a rule, but our approach was more individual. There was also a very strong reaction against all the group singing kind of thing, and the simplistic kind of politicization of it and so on. We were much more interested in the music for its own sake.
I've gathered there was a large element in the square of what I refer to always as the Camp Mommy is a Commie people, the leftists who came out of the folk music on the left. Is that correct?
Camp Gulag on the Hudson, yes. Well, you see, a lot of the kids who came down to the square were people who had spent time at these summer camps. They knew these songs from the various camps that they had gone to, and the counselors, the camp counselors who had worked with them. And this was an expression right in the middle of the village of this whole summer camp culture. It's a funny thing. I mean, it still goes on today. I mean, some of these kids are now 55, 60 years old. But you start a chorus of "Hey Lolly Lolly Lo," and they just snap right into it.
It was never one of your numbers, I take it.
No.
Where were you? Now I've got this fixed in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think that we're talking roughly around 56 to 58. Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty good. 55 to 59, if you will. But that's the right stretch.
What else were you doing professionally? Where did you play? Where did you earn a buck?
Well, I often wonder. there was very little in the way of work. The early part of it, occasionally I was working, as I said, with pickup jazz groups and doing vocals. And later, as I got more and more inclined toward doing solo things, uh, we started a group called the Folk Singers Guild around 57, I'd guess. And we used to produce our own concerts. We'd rent a theater, usually it'd be the Sullivan Street Playhouse, on one of their dark nights, on either Sunday or Monday night. And the Folk Singers Guild would produce the concert, and members of the guild would run all over the place putting up posters and this and that and the other thing. You didn't really make much money. The money was divided among the performers after the expenses, which were rather low at the time, had been taken care of. But even getting 100% of the door, you weren't going to see much money. Essentially, we all lived the same way. We all lived by taking in each other's wash. Village Luftmenschen. And some of our more fortunate colleagues were getting money from home and that sort of thing, and we always managed to be very close to these people. And there were all kinds of angles whereby you'd get a job bussing tables at an automat or something like that for a week or two. And the thing is, you could make enough money in 2 or 3 weeks to finance yourself for a month of loafing.
Changing to camera roll number 18. Camera roll 18 up.
Yeah, you want
Want to stand, Dave?
Camera roll 18 up. Take 6 up. Von Ronk.
what were we talking about?
Maybe you could say.
Yeah, do that, will you? We're moving into something I want.
Sounds good. No, well, what
What
yeah.
we're talking about.
How you could keep audience over here and music
Sounds good.
clubs.
Well, no, because it just wasn't.
18, take 6.
There really wasn't anything except for those.
Quiet. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we just tighten that up?
Mhm.
Other than what you described, any place to play as a professional musician in the mid-late 50 period doing what you were doing?
Next to nothing. The first thing that the first harbinger of that whole coffee house folk music thing must have happened as early as 58 at a place called the Cafe Bazaar. But it didn't really catch on all that much at first. In 1959, I had to go out to California to find work. New York was always seen as being the vanguard of everything, but the truth of the matter is that I left New York in '59 and I moved to Hermosa Beach in California, and within a week I was playing 2 gigs simultaneously. I had one in Hermosa Beach and I had another one on Sunset Strip at the Herbie Cohen's Unicorn. And I was shifting back and forth between those 2 things all the time. I had never seen anything like that before in my life. There was nothing comparable in New York.
And was your repertoire what you described, this blend of blues,
Yeah.
traditional folk, and jazz?
Yeah, exactly. So I came back in 1960, and it was the same old story. There wasn't any work to be had in New York, and certainly not at my level. What had been going on was in the area around McDougal Street, a couple of coffee houses had opened up, and they were featuring beat poets. And some singers were getting work in between, playing in between, sandwiched, so to speak, between beat poets. And gradually, the music became the big draw as the furor over the Beat generation sort of subsided. The place where I worked, and I suppose I really cut my teeth, was a place called the Gaslight. Now, the Gaslight was a coffee house on McDougal Street, and until the day it closed its doors, it was listed in the phone book as the Gaslight Poetry Cafe. Although by the time it closed its doors, which was probably around 1969 or 70, I don't think a poet had stepped on the stage for 7 or 8 years.
I don't see the Beats having terribly much affinity for the folk scene that existed in Washington Square or anywhere else for that matter. How did that blend work?
Well, I would say that the difference between the music in the 50s and the music in the 60s was that it was considerably, in the 60s, it was considerably darker than the music of the 50s had been. I mean, you can really hear the difference if you listen to, say, the Kingston Trio, and then you listen to someone like Freddie Neal. That there was a kind of an element of nostalgie de la bouée that entered into the music in the 1960s. It was, the vision had considerably darkened, and in that sense, it did sort of blend in with the beat poets' worldview. Not to say that there wasn't a considerable amount of political and social idealism in the music, but that didn't really that vein that didn't become the mainstream until the civil rights movement began to tap the singers, and then once again the political side became pretty much predominant.
Let's back up for a moment and talk about your initial recording for Folkways for Kenny Goldstein. How did you get yourself in a position to make that record?
Well, what I did, I decided I really needed an album. I needed the album in order to get work. I needed the album in order to validate myself to myself. And above all, I needed the album to look good to my little friends. And so I devised a strategy in which, you see, Kenny Goldstein was making a lot of records. He was producing a large number of records at that time for 2 or 3 record companies, as I recall. And so I just decided I was going to make life hell on earth for this man until he made an album of me, and it worked. I pestered that poor man every opportunity I got, and he kept on saying, "Look, you're not quite ready." And I took this as a typical fob off that you get from the big capitalists, Well, I made the album. I must say, Kenny was right. He was really right. But he did do the album for me, and it did what I had hoped that it would do. That is to say, with the album, I was now in a position to actually get work in clubs, or concerts, and that I hadn't been before. So I'm not complaining about it, but I just don't play the thing for me.
I understand that you were tremendously bothered upon learning that the artwork for the album included an espresso machine. Tell us about that.
Well, it was very much, if somebody called you a coffee house folk singer, you lost many points, and the idea that somehow or other the coffee house folk singers were a lower uh, form of life than the rest of the human race was deeply embedded in the crowd that I was hanging around with, and I had no idea what they were going to put on the cover. But when that album came out, I was in Hermosa Beach, and I saw the thing, and I just went crazy. I blew my top. If I had had the money to get back to New York, I would have dropped everything and gone back to New York just to break a couple of copies of that record over Mo Ash's head. I was that upset. Actually, Folkways used to win uh, a lot of awards for their covers, and they really, in terms of graphic design, some of the best album covers of the day, no question of that. And that album really had a very good cover. I just wished that it hadn't been an espresso machine.
In the liner notes that Kip Lornell wrote to the reissue of the Folkways stuff you did, he referred to your strong feelings about Mo Ash, but he diplomatically left out these strong feelings.
That's not fair.
Some of your strong feelings.
I loved Mo Ash. Everybody in the business loved Mo Ash. He was a very, very exasperating man. He would never pay you 10 cents if he could get away with 5, and he'd never pay you a nickel if he could get away with none. But he really loved the music. That was the most important thing to us as well as to him. And all the time that he kept that record company going, he didn't cut anything from the catalog. I mean, every album that he made was like one of his kids, and he loved all those albums. He loved that catalog of his, including some of the most cockamamie stuff you ever saw. Like there was one thing, Sounds of a South American Rainforest. I mean, at the Folkways Imprimatur. And I really wanted to record for Folkways. I didn't expect to make any money from the record. Good thing. And the thing is, it was the label that Woody Guthrie was on. It was the label that Pete Seeger was on. That was the label that you took seriously, and that was the label that I wanted, and I got it.
Did you ever get any royalties at all from those two records?
Well, once in a while I'd go up to Mo's office in the West 40s. And I had this special outfit that I used to put on. I had this old jacket that I used to wear when I was shipping out as a merchant seaman for a while. And when you'd have to go down into the tanks and clean out the tanks, we were sailing on a chemical tanker, I used to put this thing on sort of as a coverall for, over the top of me bod. And the thing was just an incredibly filthy rag, and it smelled of acetone. Nothing could remove the smell of acetone from it. It was this nail polish remover, which is what we carried a great deal of time. And so I go marching in these rags and say,
That's the end of camera roll 18. End of camera roll 18. End of sound roll number 8. End of sound roll number 8. What's that I hear? Continuing interview with D. Von Ronk.